The SciComm Collective acknowledges the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the lands we study, write and record on, and their sovereignty was never ceded. Hello and welcome to the SciComm Collective.
Different useful knowledge in different areas.
The joy is sharing it, making science accessible, the ignored final step of the scientific method. Every different perspective.
Science is culture.
The SciComm Collective, bringing science and science communication to you.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the SciComm Collective. My name is Kate.
My name is Camila.
We are joined here today with
Alana Dooley.
Hooray! Thanks so much for joining us, Alana. We are recording today at the Udare Reid Library, which is also on Whadjuk Noongar Budja. We're in the brand new level 1 study spaces. It's just been redone and it's been named Bilya Biddy, which is something to do with rivers and stories. So I think it will tie into what we're talking about today. Just to start off with, as a way of getting to know each other, I wanted to let you know that my pronouns are she and her, and that I grew up on the lands of the Amungu and Yamatji people in the Midwest of Western Australia. I'm a current Master of Science Communication student here at UWA, and for the last couple of years, I've been involved with radio astronomy here in Western Australia via ICRAS, the International Centre of Radio Astronomy Research, and the Australian SKA Regional Centre, also known as AusSRC. Acronyms and astronomers, man, like what? Camila, what would you like to share?
Hello, everyone. My name is Camila. My pronouns are she, her. Originally from Colombia. I recently finished my Master of Science Communication at UWA. My undergraduate studies were in literature and biology. One of my main interests in research is transdisciplinary science. I've worked as an editor and a translator. I've worked in conservation as well for a little bit, WWF. And I do a little bit of science writing as well. I thought it was so cool. Yeah, it's cool.
A little bit of everything. So, Alana, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Alana Dooley. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a Ghana Narungga woman. So my family ties are over in South Australia, but I was born and raised here on Whadjuk Noongar Budja. I am a science art student at Curtin at the moment. So I'm doing coastal and marine science and professional writing and publishing. It's a very long title. So I often try not to say it. And I also work in the science communication field, which I sort of fell into quite early, which I was lucky to do because I love it. A couple of years ago, I interned with ABC where I wrote some science articles and had a little bit of a science segment going, chatting to local scientists, which was amazing. And I just like to, chat about science and talk about it.
Well, you're in the right space because here we are talking about science and science communication. Our first question is, how did you get into science communication and trying to blend the arts and the sciences together, for want of a better expression?
It started when I was really young. I wanted to be an astronaut. As is, I think, typical of a lot of us who end up on any sort of science trajectory. It's like space or dinosaurs, and I chose space. And then as I got older, I was like, I don't really want to go to space, but I'd really like to understand it. So I went through high school. I told my teachers that I was interested in science, and they were really excited for me. I was super fortunate. I went to a very supportive school. I went to Warwick Senior High, which is a public school in the Perth's northern suburbs. Yeah. And I got to year 11 and 12 and my school was so supportive. My ATAR classes had 5-6 people in them. So there wasn't a ton of us who went down that path, but whatever path you wanted to go down was great. Yeah. You want to go TAFE, you go to TAFE. You want to be a Ricky, you want to be a Ricky. That's awesome. You want to study physics? Go study physics. Amazing. We'll do everything we can to help you get there. Yeah.
Having a support system can really make a difference. Like a good support system. Yeah.
Totally did.
And were you always interested in the sciences?
No. I just loved space and I thought it was pretty.
It still is.
Yeah, totally is.
My whole family are quite artistic. Mm-hmm. So I was definitely more on that artistic side of things. I was a really sporty kid. And it wasn't, till I got a little bit older that I was like, science is really cool. Maybe I could do that too. And then I just started chatting to people more and I realized I really enjoyed talking about science. And I think SciComm probably started for me when I was in year 12. I was fortunate enough to win a National Indigenous STEM Award.
It's amazing. Tell us more about it.
So it was through CSIRO, and I just met some absolutely incredible people through it. For example, Corey Tutt, who runs Deadly Science, or Professor Brad Mogridge, who I recently went on a boat with as part of an amazing integrating Indigenous knowledges with science experience. But all of those people were just amazing. And they were people who were further ahead in their life and field and careers than I was. So as a 17-year-old,
Wow.
just meeting these mob in all different fields of science was like, you know, being in a class of 5 people and then being in a room of Aboriginal scientists was like, this is unbelievable. And that was my first time, being exposed to that on such a broad scale. And I came back to Perth after those awards, Bulu, and people just started asking me to talk about the awards and talk about the people that I met. And I was like, yeah, sure, I like to chat. So I started talking about these things more. And then I was actually part of a government campaign called Take 2 STEM, which encouraged people to take science classes at high school, just to see what's out there, test the waters, show that science can be for everyone. And that was my first taste of SciComm, and then I never stopped.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did SciComm mean to you back then? And do you think that notion or definition has changed?
I think a lot of it was for me representation on many fronts. Yeah. Being a woman, being Aboriginal.
All these different Venn diagrams that overlap.
Yeah, totally. So I was very aware that I was super privileged to have a very supportive network and know a lot of people. But that's not what most people have.
No.
So for me, it was, and Corey Tutt, like he said this great thing, and it's always in the back of my mind, you can't be what you can't see. And I think that's something we hear a lot in the SciComm world and in a lot of different fields for people who are underrepresented. So I think a lot of what I do comes from that space of, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Sometimes seeing somebody who's like you can make that step a little bit easier.
Yeah, I mean, and that's pretty much what's happened with you. You've seen Corey Tutt and all these other incredible leaders in the space, and you're going, oh, I can do that.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today had it not been for meeting all of those incredible, inspiring people back when I was in school. So the impact that they've had on me is just tremendous.
Yeah. So you were saying that you studied physics and then at school, and where did that lead you next?
I did like my physics, I did my maths classes at school, and then I started at Curtin doing the same degree I'm doing now, but with a different science major. So I was doing physics and professional writing and publishing. And I got there and I really liked it, but I think I liked it more in theory than the actual practice of being a physics student. I still absolutely love physics, but I realized maybe it wasn't what I wanted to study. So I did it for 2 years. I gave it a really good stab. And then I was kind of like, I want to try something new for a year. And I went off and I studied artsy things for a year. I did Aboriginal performance at WAPA, which is basically theatre and contemporary dance, but through a Black lens.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it was amazing. I thought it would be a gap year. It was not. It was the hardest I've ever worked in my life. It was like 40 hours of training a week. And then, finished that course. It was 1 year and still stayed super interested in physics, but realised that I wanted to explore a different science avenue and picked up the coastal science.
Yeah, and you're doing that alongside, what was it?
Professional writing and publishing.
Yeah, I think why we asked, like, what is science communication to you? Because there's so many different definitions of what science communication is, and that science communication may not have the nice label put on it, but from the sounds, like, obviously you're doing science communication, but doing the professional writing as well as the coastal science, that's trying to blend those two things together, and try to do science communication.
Yeah, that resonates with me because I always loved science, but I always loved literature as well. While I loved science, science doesn't provide all the answers. And approaching the world through a merely scientific lens is not enough. So I decided to go into humanities or the literature side of things. Because, to me, science, while it's great, it's not enough.
Yeah, likewise. Like, I both got an arts degree. I did an arts degree first, even though I had a science degree ready to go at UWA. I was like, I want to try out arts. I want to do linguistics and cool things like that. Went and did a health science degree. But no, it's funny how these things all interweave and you still get to the end result eventually. that's just life in general. What I wanted to ask was, how do you do psychom as someone who uses both Western science and creative arts as well as Indigenous knowledges? Does that change how you do things?
What tends to just be at the forefront of my mind is that a lot of the time when we consume science, it was designed and spoken about by a certain demographic for a certain demographic. So, well, I don't tend to communicate Indigenous knowledges all the time. Like I might, talk about a particular story if I'm doing a show at work.
So that's SciTech.
Yeah. A lot of my forms of communication tend to just be breaking things down, just communicating them in a way that is accessible for everybody and doesn't just have a very specific person and audience in mind. Because I think that's what a lot of science is, yes, unfortunately. But we're changing it, so it's good.
And we're having conversations about it. So that's a good start.
I'm also curious about whether your background in performance has changed or informed as well the way you communicate science. If you brought some of those tools, skills, if you want to call them, into the way you do psychom?
Yeah, I probably have, I think. I really enjoy being able to perform, and I think a lot of science communication is a form of performance.
Oh, I agree.
Absolutely. So I think I probably have taken a lot of those skills and put them into the presenting world unintentionally. But yeah, all in the storytelling. To me, a lot of my method is speak it as a narrative rather than just, this is the facts, this is a black and white thing. Like, go on a journey. I think things are a lot more interesting to a wider range of people.
I think that's it.
So just the importance of storytelling in science communication, it just ties up with how, I don't want to sound like I'm explaining your own cultures, but just how in Indigenous Australian languages and cultures, so much of the storytelling is oral and the passing down of knowledge and things like that.
So storytelling is such a rich field, I guess, but the idea about storytelling that persists to this day, I think it's very Western still, very linear. However, it's very interesting to see science communicators with different backgrounds or even different interests trying to incorporate all these other forms of storytelling or trying to make them visible as well and incorporating them into their day-to-day life and their jobs. So I think that's invaluable.
So, Alana, you mentioned earlier that you work for SciTech, which is incredible because I too work for SciTech. I don't get to work with you currently. I left in 2020, but I was there for a number of years. And Camila, you work...
Yeah, I work with her too. I'm a customer service officer there.
So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about how we have all got experience working in visitor centre type science communication and just to the table. What are some of the joys and challenges of interacting with the quote-unquote general public in that way?
In my case, it can be a little challenging, for sure. But it's really fun when people come to you with questions, especially about animals or about the science or conservation, what we actually do at the zoo. It's always a joy to spread that message and tell people what we are doing. For instance, a native species breeding program we have going on.
Numbats one?
Numbats, yes. We also do some work with a bunch of other species. So when people ask for, fun facts about animals or in their habitat, so it's always a joy to spread that information and then seeing the expression on their faces, like, oh, I didn't know that. That's very cool. I guess maybe this might sound very deficit-based.
So the deficit model is assuming that people don't know anything about science when really everyone brings a little bit of their own knowledge everywhere they go.
Yes. Thank you, Kate, for that. Yeah.
Link in the show notes to deficit model papers that you can read at your own leisure.
But it's always fun to teach them something or when they say, oh, well, I learned something new today.
Yeah. Likewise, grew up in country WA and it would be working with the teachers who would be organising a visit to SciTech as, say, like part of their school camp, or whether SciTech was going out in the then red trucks and visiting the communities, and just all the schools and the teachers just being so grateful that SciTech would go out there and take their time to visit them because part of the deadly science work that Corey Tutt does is getting STEM resources into regional and rural and really isolated places. I think also for me, SciTech was the people, like not the general public, quote unquote, but the working with the people. It's some of my dearest friends still, even though I've left the place. I was saying how there's 3 degrees of separation here in Perth, but there's 1 degree of SciTech. You always know at least one person who's worked at SciTech, and it's very much a common path of getting into science communication.
Yeah, totally. I've been at SciTech for going on 2 years now, and I just adore it. I think it's like the coolest job ever. I feel very lucky that I have a job where I wake up and I'm excited to go to.
Absolutely.
I think the challenges of the job are also my biggest joys. Obviously, in a visitor centre, you're communicating with a lot of people every day. So the question is, how do I communicate a message to such a large group?
Absolutely.
If you're presenting a show, it's maybe a little bit easier because you've got an audience in there and you can answer questions as they come to you and you can get out the points that you want to get across. But if you're just wandering the centre, you've got to think, this person looks like they're really interested in this. I'm going to go talk to them about that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many people to do it to, and you want to talk to everyone. And sometimes you can't talk to every single person, obviously, especially in those really busy times. So I guess that's one of the challenges, but it's also awesome because it's great to see how many people are interested and engaged and excited. And another of the challenges, which is also something that I love, is when someone asks me something that I don't know.
I love that moment. It's like,
Best. Yeah.
it's also demonstrating how science works, because science is supposedly meant to have all the answers, right? But if you go to the visitor and say, I actually don't know that, but let's go figure it out together.
Let's figure it out together. Exactly. Because that's what science is about, right? Not knowing.
Yeah.
And then finding out and investigating.
And being okay not knowing. But yeah, when I was at SciTech, you'd kind of see the same kinds of faces over and over and over. They kind of fit into a certain demographic. And part of that is a concept that is called science capital. And it's about whether you have all the tools in your tool belt to know how to navigate a place and feel like you belong. And it feeds off the work of, Pierre Bourdieu. He's a sociologist. And then taking that even further is a London-based science and technology studies researcher, Emily Dawson, and her work is around visiting museums and feeling like you don't belong, and like whether you have the tools in your tool belt to feel like you belong. The thing about Dawson's work is that she examines populations that, like, say they go to the British Museum, which is full of stolen artifacts and things like that. And shout out to Stuff the British Stole by Mark Fennell. I love that podcast, and also the TV series that has come from that. That kind of like cultural aggression means that you feel like that place is not for you. Tying that very long monologue about science capital to visiting science centres and the zoo and things like that, well, it's a question you don't have to have the answer to, but how do you create spaces in visitor centres that are more inclusive and welcoming, and how do you increase science capital in people who may not have it? Like you were talking before, like you can't be who you can't see, and obviously programs like that are fantastic. But what do you do if you don't have access to that sort of program? It's a tricky one, I know.
It is a tricky one. It is. But I'm really interested in learning more about the idea of science capital.
In my case, I guess, again, with the deficit model, apologies, but you'll find the link in our notes. That mentality of assuming that people are scientifically illiterate, just eradicate that. Come to people, while they might not have a scientific background, they might have stories or understanding or awareness of certain concepts.
They may know someone who is a scientist, their parents or a friend. They may be a scientist, so they feel comfortable going to a science centre and things like that. So that's one of those many tools in the tool belt that we're talking about.
I think in that case, instead of assuming they're scientifically illiterate, just have conversations. Mm-hmm. No matter what the audience or the person is, what their background is, what their age is. What did you like about the zoo, for instance? Mm-hmm. Oh, I like this and this. I didn't know you had this animal. Then go from there. Did you know that this species is important for X reason? Oh, I didn't know that. But I remember the first time I came to the zoo, build knowledge from there. And I think that's a way to make the zoo or any other science center or museum, somewhere people feel comfortable visiting, because they can have these conversations there and where it won't be assumed that they're they don't belong there just because they do not have a scientific background or because they don't really know about conservation or about animals.
I've just been reminded one of the challenges of working in a science centre was you'd get the people who already know everything, but they'd come to you and be like, look how much I know. I need to tell you everything. It's the full spectrum of people that you do get in those science centres. But at the same time, you get the same kinds of people coming. This is all assuming, of course, that we want people to come to these science centres and learn something. So that's, again, that deficit model thinking.
Exactly. I feel in my case, or well, at least in a place like the zoo, having conversations without assuming that you know better because you work at the zoo and because you have a degree in biology or whatever, then no, don't go from there.
You can also link it back to like the storytelling idea that we were talking about before. Like science communication is storytelling. So if you're having a conversation, that's also where the narrative and the storytelling comes in as well.
There's so many different ways to communicate one idea. And I think I try to be led off of the person that I'm talking to. And like you, Camila, I'll ask them a question. It might just be, what are you looking at? What can you see right now? Or what do you know about this? And then just go from there, see what they want to know.
I think when I'm reflecting on my own practice now, having done science communication as a field of study, the question I should have been asking was, what do you already know? Instead of just assuming that they don't know anything.
I think it's important we talk about the future of SciComm and diversity. Where do you want science communication to be in 5 to 10 years?
Because you are literally the future of science communication.
I'd like to be able to say I work in science communication and people will be like, oh, yeah.
I would love that. I went to a party on the weekend and I'm like, oh, I'm studying something called science communication. And you just get this blank look. But if you just said, I'm working in comms, they would get it. But it's adding science to it that it's not quite there yet. So I'm 100% behind that.
I had the same situation recently. I was talking to someone and they were like, oh, Bill Nye.
For me is how do I explain science communication without reverting to what's like Dr. Carl or David Attenborough does, because that is so narrow. Also, it's very gendered.
I think of all the people that I think of as a big science communicator.
And they're all men.
Yeah.
And
they do incredible work. But in terms of diversity.
Yeah, link in the show notes, there's literally a paper that says, hey, most of SciComm is women.
I went and saw a prominent science communicator do a show recently. And they made a okay, I'm going to say it. It's Neil deGrasse Tyson. He talked about working at a planetarium, right? And I also work in a planetarium. I love it. And he made a comment about how he has the voice for it. People love listening to that deep voice. It's what you need to work in a planetarium. You need that deep, booming voice. And I was thinking, it's very possible that I'm the only person in this room other than him who also works in a planetarium. And my voice sounds nothing like his. I've got this high-pitched, I'm a young woman, with this high-pitched voice. And people do come and hear me talk about space. And I love it. Love Neil deGrasse Tyson though, but I was like,
Yeah, to go on a side tangent, I've watched the ABC iView series, The Newsreader, and it's set in the 80s, and how newsreaders, particularly if you're a woman, you're expected to drop your pitch because you're trying to be a man, essentially, and be authoritative that way. So
your role models don't have to be men. And that's changing, at least in SciComm in Perth, my experience. And it's funny because when I get asked, what's SciComm? And I say, well, it's about making science more accessible to different audiences. We're talking about accessibility, but still these role models we look up to are male. So it's important that we're trying to do things differently.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of that in like 5-10 years, I'd just like to see women in those powerful, known positions. If I said to someone in 5 years, oh, I'm a science communicator, they might say, oh, like this woman.
Yes. But I really love what you said about like I'm in 5 to 10 years asking, I do SciComm and people not looking at you funny.
I feel like your career path very much matches my own, where I've gone to university a number of times, switched and changed. I feel like that's very much a path towards science communication because you're trying to do both the science and the arts and you're trying to make them both work. But where's the journey going if you have any ideas? Where would you like to be?
I was talking to someone the other day and I was saying, I don't know what I want to do. And then they looked at me and they said, but you're doing it. And I was like, oh, that's so true. I absolutely adore what I do. I love what I study. I love what I do for work. I feel like I found this really nice blend of the science and the arts, two things that I'm really interested in. And I think my problem is trying to categorize something that doesn't necessarily need to be categorized.
You have just hit a nail on the head of one of the thorns in the side of the field of science communication, because trying to define it is impossible.
It's so hard. And then when this person said to me, they were like, but you're already doing it. And I was like, I actually am. You told me a few years ago that I'd be studying arts and science at uni and I'd be working and my job would just be to have conversations about science with people. I would be like, that's the coolest thing ever. And I do think it's the coolest thing ever. And I feel super lucky. I think just ride the wave.
Yeah.
See where it goes. People often talk about networking and the word networking really freaks me out.
It's just talking.
Yes. And then I think for a long time I've been unintentionally networking because I like to chat a lot. And I think all of the exciting things that have happened to me have just come from having that informal conversation a lot of the time. So I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm excited. Oh, I'll be happy.
We also have another question. Might be a little tricky, so feel free to share as much or as little as you want. But we were curious, from a Western perspective, what can allies do to make spaces and SciComm in general more welcoming, more inclusive?
Yeah. I think it's important to acknowledge that science, when it's typically spoken of and typically understood as, is Western science.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's what's being spoken about in university settings, in most settings. When you hear science, it is that very colonial view.
Yes.
And science is colonial and it has been weaponized for hundreds of years.
Against your own people.
Science hasn't always been a tool that's been used for the betterment of humanity to develop understanding. It has been used to demonize people. And incorrect science has also been used to demonize people historically. We've seen it in Australia. We've seen it all over the world. And I don't think that we can move really far forward unless that's all on the table, to be honest.
Yeah. If I may speak as the white person in the room, but also an ally, I would like to make it known. I voted yes for the referendum. But if our own country acknowledge its first people, how are we going to go forward in this country and trickle down effects to science, to trickle down to other parts of our society? And it's a wicked problem, but yeah, how do we keep fighting the good fight, essentially?
What you spoke on reminded me, even currently, people use an incorrect understanding of science to justify certain things. For example, eugenics.
Yes.
I have very pale skin, but I'm Aboriginal.
Yeah.
And no Aboriginal person ever questions that. But you speak to a white fella and it's like, hang on, what do you have to say here? And it's like, well, I am Aboriginal. It's an archaic science, which was used in the implementation of very harmful policies for a long time. But because it had its quote unquote basis in science, that understanding has prevailed for a long time.
Yeah. If I may speak out of turn, as you mentioned, you've got very fair skin, but that's literally the result of the regime in which that was designed to happen, right? So the whole half-caste and bringing the stolen generations into and assimilating into white society. I had a family member who said, oh, they weren't even black enough. And it's just like, oh, gosh. But still, it's like that is literally what the program was meant to do, was to breed out the blackness, so to speak.
And it's always a weird conversation to have because I do have white privilege. Yeah. That's a fact.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm perceived as white, typically.
Yeah, you're white passing.
I'm white passing. So I do benefit from white privilege. But there's also all of this other stuff that's coming into play in my day-to-day life, which other people don't necessarily think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like in my case, well, I come from a country that has a history of colonization as well. And in many cases, or in many places, I would be considered a minority, quote unquote. But when I come here, and especially during my work with the traditional owners helping Broome, you realize that you are the problem as well. Yeah, you can still be considered a quote unquote minority and still replicate Western colonial structures as well. So it's very tricky. You have to sit with that discomfort.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to have these difficult conversations.
Yeah, because your dissertation's all about that, like your master's dissertation. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, my master's dissertation explored how transdisciplinary science unfolds in the wild using the YJJMB project as a case study. In this period of doing things better or working different, we did have some post-colonial moments. That's another academic term, but basically it was just those moments where the different knowledge systems clashed, basically. our different perspectives and ways of doing things, there was a shop there. And how we navigated those moments was key, because from a Western perspective, we really had to understand that sometimes good faith is not enough. And this is a different territory. The colonial baggage, the history of dispossession. How do we stop replicating those things, and how do we actually give back?
Yeah.
One of the most important things was having members of the Yaoru community telling us, we always have to give up something or lose something to win.
Or to gain something. Yeah.
Exactly. How do we actually acknowledge that these are valid knowledge systems, that these are people who've been the traditional owners for millennia?
Yeah.
How to come here and work with them without just extracting information?
Yeah, and I don't have the answers to this, but something that I think about is there's also this view in Western science that because there is knowledge, you are entitled to it.
Yes. And that's a
You're
very
not.
white thing. Yes.
You're not entitled to any knowledge that's not your own.
Absolutely.
Something that might be part of a particular knowledge system isn't necessarily yours to have or to take or to write a paper on, to go there, get that information and then leave.
I agree.
It's all about crediting, credit where there's credit's due. But if you've written a paper, it's your name on the thing, not the traditional owners necessarily. Like, you have to go out of your way to put acknowledgements there.
Something that I've been seeing happening recently, and I think it's really awesome, is in papers, in the authors acknowledging the land or the waters where things have been happening. And I just think that is the coolest thing.
That's a very post-human shift that we're starting to see, and I'm here for it. Yeah.
I did this really cool acknowledgement of country workshop a couple of years ago, and it's why I try and say, hey, I grew up here, but now I'm here, because so much about mob is like, where are you from?
Yeah.
And like building connections that way. One of the first questions is like, where are you from? And the importance of lands and things like that. So we got from a Western perspective what allies can be doing. But
it's acknowledging that colonial history.
Yeah.
Talking about it so that we don't do it again. If you don't talk about it, it's going to happen again.
Exactly. Just even in my lifetime, I've gone from primary school where I was taught that Captain Cook was the person who founded Australia. In my undergrad years, I missed out on doing what is quite normal now and doing a first year Indigenous Australia unit. Again, I missed out in my second one, but I finally got to my third, and it's so common to be spoken about now. And like, universities are quite generally safe spaces. So yeah, the change is happening. It's just very gradual.
Yeah, exactly. Or from my perspective, I think from Latin America or the Caribbean, and then still thinking that Christopher Columbus's arrival was a discovery. In fact, it was genocide.
And that's another thing that Western science prioritizes, the idea of discovery.
Yes. Exactly.
And it's not everything's a discovery. Some things are relearnings, and you can acknowledge that things happened before you wrote it down.
Yeah.
Or it's a discovery for a very small segment of the population.
Yeah.
But yeah, even the word discovery is very problematic.
Yeah, I agree. It wasn't discovered, it was invaded.
Invaded, dispossessed, colonized. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's call it what it is.
This is a problem too in science communication. We keep talking about the same thing. It's like, okay, this is what the problem is.
Do something about it.
We need to work on the how and the why. And it's something that Heather said in her Raising the Bar, was a lot of science communication is actually problem communication, where you're communicating the problem first so that you can then go fix it. But then you're doing so much of the problem communication that you don't actually get to do the fixing communication. So just before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you about some other things that you've done in your very short life. It's amazing. You said earlier about how you were on a ship. Can you speak more to that?
So in April this year, I was really fortunate to attend the JR Academy. So basically that was an expedition, a voyage expedition on the scientific vessel, the Joides Resolution.
Wow.
On this trip, there was 3 students from Australia from different communities, as well as 2 Indigenous mentors who work in different spaces in Indigenous science. One of them is Anne-Marie Long, who works for the Indigenous Women's STEM Academy, And the other one is Professor Brad Moggridge, who I mentioned earlier as somebody who I've been fortunate to know for a few years now. 2 students from New Zealand and a mentor, and then diverse students from the US. And that was incredible. The Joides Resolution is a coring vessel, so it takes course and studies geology and climate in deep ocean. It's one of the only 2 vessels in the world that exclusively is used for scientific drilling. Hopefully it gets more money so it can keep doing this awesome work, because it's really important for the climate record what work they do. But anyway, went to Naples and met this diverse group of people. While we were there, we did a tour of Pompeii and then Mount Vesuvius, and a lot of the people there were geology students or geologists. I didn't come from that background, so it was all really new to me. So everything was like, whoa. You get so caught up in maybe the area that you're really interested in, you forget about how exciting literally every other aspect of science and just life is. Then we hopped on board this vessel, and we were on it for around about 2 weeks as it sailed from Naples to Amsterdam. And the JR Academy they've run previously, and it's typically to give geology students an insight into geoscience careers. But the theme of this one was bridging Indigenous and Western sciences. We had a huge diversity of people on board the ship. And we were having, honestly, a lot of the conversations that we've been having today, conversations like colonialism in science, breaking down those barriers, accessibility in science, and just acknowledging science's history. So we had sessions on there about earth lore. I don't know if you guys have heard of.
No, tell us more.
It's not something I'm super duper familiar with, but my understanding of it is that it's about understanding the agency of the lands and waters themselves.
So law as in LA.
LAW, yes. If it comes to like research projects or science or just the use of lands, which is, I think, important in science because we use Earth's resources in all the science that we do. And in this day and age, when we're maybe not looking after the Earth's resources the way we should be, important conversations to have. So we had sessions on that, Indigenous astronomy, which was really interesting because we were in the Northern Hemisphere. Of course. So we saw some different constellations. Luckily, there was some which obviously overlapped with where we were. Even seeing a Northern Hemisphere sky was just incredible. We spent time weaving. And a lot of the conversations we had were like hard, confronting chats because you can't have these conversations without acknowledging the issues.
Yes. And lots of post-colonial moments. To bring it back to class.
Yeah. The post-colonial moment is when different knowledge systems just come together and there might be a shock there.
Or clash.
Or there's a clash. How do we work with different writers in that case? Well, how do we navigate this challenge or these differences?
If I may share a personal example, it's the fact that I'm on a 4 or 5 generation wheat and sheep farm, which I consider my family's. But it's also in clash with the idea that it was not actually mine in the first place.
But it was really interesting in having conversations like what you've just mentioned. There were so many parallels in all of our experiences, which was uniting, but it was also like, oh my God, I can't believe this awful stuff has happened to all of us. Yeah. And it's in like these commonalities in all of our histories. So on the one hand, it was like, this is really hard, but it was also beautiful for us to all be together. And it was from the get-go, it was such a safe space. The way it was facilitated was very well done. Our voices always felt completely valued on board the ship. But along with talking about Indigenous sciences and Western sciences, we also got to just have a look at their labs. And they have cores on board. So they drill down, like it can reach kilometers down this vessel. It's absolutely incredible.
Sounds like it.
So we got to open up cores and have a look at the samples. Like we were making smear slides. It was just unbelievable. And every night we spent on the deck just looking up at the stars. We went days without seeing another boat. So the view of the stars were just incredible. But yeah, a lot of it was just such a uniting experience, seeing other Indigenous peoples who are doing similar things in different places, who care about the future of science. And that representation and that Indigenous peoples have always done science and our voices are very important in science-based.
In that vein, I was wondering, how much does your cultural background, your mob, enrich your understanding of the night sky? Because you were just talking about the night sky and working in the planetarium as well.
Well, I've grown up in Bulloo, Perth, which is off country. So it probably doesn't play as much of a role for me as it would other people who have grown up like on their lands. But I have always felt very connected to the night sky from a very young age. I think I could spend night after night just looking up and I'd never get bored, to be honest.
I'm interested to know, I too love the SciTech Planetarium, like just as a space and as a staff member. Do you get opportunities to talk about Indigenous or cultural astronomy in the SciTech Planetarium?
Yeah, I do. So something which I love about SciTech is there's quite an open communication model, I would say there, which I really like. So I do work in the planetarium, and the live shows that we do, we call them the night sky portion of our shows, they are unscripted, which I think is a really beautiful thing that we get to do, because we can adapt our show to whatever's happening in the night sky at that moment and whatever someone might be interested in. So if you're really interested in Mars, you can go to Mars. But if I want to spend a while talking about the emu in the sky, I'm going to spend a while talking about the emu in the sky. I'm the only Indigenous planetarium presenter, but other people talk about the emu in the sky in their shows as well. And it's always something that's really interesting. Or perhaps Maui's fishhook, where going across to different regions in the Southern Hemisphere and different knowledge systems. And something that I like to try to talk about in my shows is, I'll say, there's 88 officially recognised constellations, but there's countless more. These are the ones that the International Astronomical Union says this is what they are, but that doesn't mean these are the only things people have seen in the sky. You know, every culture on Earth has used the skies as a tool forever. It's not 88 pictures that have been seen only. You know, what you see is depending on where you are, your cultural background, and you could look up to the sky today and see a different picture. Doesn't mean it's wrong.
And those constellations are very of its time as well. There's things like ships and a compass and, very Western.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of them that we see are from, Greek mythology, but there's a few that have crept in there from different areas. But, talking about the asterisms, not just the officially recognised constellations, is something that I think is important. And I think it's because when you look at astronomy, like I always describe it, the stars as having been a tool forever. And I think astronomy is the first form of science because, you use it to map the land, understand the seasons, understand the behaviour of animals. And I think in the Southern Hemisphere it was really, and continues to be really powerful. And it's not just the boundaries that are set out by one body. Doesn't dictate what we see in the sky. We can see a lot more things in the sky.
As we wrap up, any advice for young people or people in general wanting to get into science communication and science?
Yeah, totally. Say yes to every single opportunity that comes your way. I was a pretty nervous kid when I used to be really shy. I'm still a nervous person, but I'm far less shy now. Instead of being quiet when I'm nervous, I just talk a lot. But have conversations with people. If somebody's doing work that you think is interesting, go and ask them about it. People love talking about themselves and the work they do. Like, hey, what do you do? Can I learn about that? Or if there's something that you're interested in, send an email to someone who works in that field. Visit science centres like SciTech. Go to the zoo, ask questions. When I was in grade 10, 11 maybe, I sent an email to ICRA, International Centre for Radio Astronomy Research, and said, hey, can I come do work experience? And they said, yeah. And then I went out and did work experience and it was just awesome. And the people that I now connect with on a more professional level or the colleagues level were people who actually now seen me from when I was 16 years old.
And they've nurtured you from the start.
Yeah, and they saw that I was interested and they thought, awesome, let's help her. And let's chat to her and let's show her all the different pathways that there are. Just have a chat. Tell your teachers what you want to do. I also got to do work experience at CSIRO in their astronomy and space science unit. And that was because I told my science teacher that I was interested in space. And he was chatting to this guy who worked at CSIRO and said, I had a student who thinks she likes space. She's kind of interested. And then he said to me, do you want to go do work experience there? And I was like, yes, absolutely. Both of those things were like kind of like daunting experiences, especially where, not like work experience wasn't a thing like a part of my curriculum. So it's just a thing that I did. I missed like a week of school here and there to just go and like hang out with scientists. And it was awesome. Just, anyone you find interesting, reach out and just have a chat. I love chatting about what I do and so does everyone else. And I want to see this field grow and grow and grow.
Oh, that's great advice.
Everybody wants to see the things they do just rise.
Absolutely.
So people will be very excited to help you along the way and to give you advice or answer any questions that you have. And if they don't know the answer, like Kate was saying, there's not many degrees of separation here in Perth. If they don't know the answer, they will know someone who does.
Well, the future is very bright with you with it, Alana. It's been such a privilege talking to you on the Cyclone Collective podcast today. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. Find us online at thecyclonecollective.com. That's com with 2 M's. Questions or comments about today's episode? Get in touch on Instagram at The Cyclone Collective. The Cyclone Collective is supported by UWA's Grand Challenges Impact Grant.